Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Lantern Sports Podcast. We're glad to have you here with us. My name is Grant Miller, and to my right, sporting his cool .the I t-shirt, is Geoff Hammersley. Geoff, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, Grant. Ready to talk about some more sports this week.
All about sports here on this podcast. Well, next to him is Matt McGreevy. How's your Tuesday going, Matt?
It's good. I dress up for this and you comment his shirt, but I'm doing well.
Matt is dressed up very nicely. I wish all of you could see it. And then next to him, not dressed up, is Brett Amadon. Brett, how you doing?
I'm not dressed up, but gotta be honest with you, I'm not feeling too good. I applied for graduation today, so feeling kind of low.
Well, I don't think you should feel low. It's
the end of an era.
Well, you succeeded a lot. You worked really hard to get your degree.
It's the end of an era, man.
Certainly is. Well, we're going to begin here by talking about men's hockey at Ohio State, which had its final weekend of the season the past couple of days in the Big Ten tournament in St. Paul, Minnesota. They did fall in the championship game to Wisconsin, 5-4 in overtime, a heartbreaking loss, which means their season's over, but certainly they did some great things in the tournament and the season overall, so we'll start by talking about that. And I guess first I'll throw it over to you, Matt McGreevy. I mean, what would you think about Ohio State's season overall, the first in the Big Ten, a very competitive league and playing some great teams, and just come up short of an NCAA tournament appearance?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it last week about the parity in the in the Big Ten, and I think the most impressive thing about Ohio State's season was the fact that they were able to compete with every team. Obviously, you take a look at who they had the most trouble with, and that was Michigan. And again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but it was a team that they played in the CCHA, and so they're not unfamiliar with the Wolverines, so to speak, but I thought Ohio State did extremely well, and they were able to beat every team, and it was a perfect example of that this weekend when they rolled through Michigan State and Wisconsin, gave them a hiccup there at the end, but you beat Minnesota on the way. Things are pretty good.
Yeah, well, what do you think about that, Brett?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because if you look at the season as a whole, the way the season started for Ohio State, it started with a little bit of turmoil with the whole goalie situations. They didn't start off hot, losing a bunch of games to Miami, Ohio, Bowling Green to start the year, but they started to rebound. They started to find their identity in the year, and that's when they started to play their best hockey. I think you saw that on display in Minnesota. They were able to beat a very competitive Michigan State team, a team that they've played close games in every contest this year, and then to defeat number one Minnesota, who's going to have the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament. I thought that was a great accomplishment. They weren't able to get it done against Wisconsin. That's something we can talk more about. They definitely had their opportunities, but I think if you take a season as a whole, Rollick definitely did a great job of bringing this team together, and I think it was successful and something they can build off of.
Yeah, sure. And so that recap of the tournament in the quarterfinals, they beat Michigan State in overtime 2-1. That was a Drew Brevik goal, winning that one. A really great contest. Ohio State had to come from behind. Then against Minnesota in the semis, probably their most impressive performance of the season, you'd have to say. I mean, Minnesota team that no matter what is going to the tournament, they knew that, but just to come out and play them like they did, 3-1 win. There was a late open net or empty net goal from, I think, Anthony Greco. And then, like we said, losing 5-4 to Wisconsin in the final game. A team that they actually beat twice during the season. I mean, I thought before the tournament started, if they had to face Wisconsin in the final, they would be really happy with that, because they split home and away, both when they went to Madison, they lost 1-1, same when they came here to Columbus. I was more worried about the Minnesota game, and that turned out to be maybe something that got them up to a bit of a higher degree of playing. I mean, intensity-wise, you're playing the top team, so maybe that might have helped them.
Yeah, if you look about it, the Big Ten tournament, excuse me, Matt mentioned the parity, and that could not have been more on display than in the Big Ten tournament. Penn State going in and knocking off Michigan, a team that they got their first Big Ten win against. That was very impressive for them, and they had a great performance against Wisconsin as well. Ohio State going in against Minnesota, they executed a great game plan, and I got to think that had something to do with their last performance against Minnesota, the shootout victory, and they used that high, and they really got off to a great start against Wisconsin. And even when Wisconsin battled back and tied the game, Ohio State was able to get it back together, get another 2-goal lead. They weren't able to finish them off, but I really feel like that Minnesota game catapulted them to the start that they had against Wisconsin. And even though they weren't able to close it out, it was still a great team effort. Dzingel showed up. He showed why he's one of the leading point scorers in the nation, Hobie Baker Award nominee. So a lot of good things to build off of for Ohio State. You mentioned it, Christian Fry, 5 goals against Wisconsin, but that shouldn't diminish what he had accomplished this year. He made a lot of big-time saves and big-time games for Ohio State. And, like I said a couple minutes ago, it's definitely something they can work off of.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned probably their two biggest players of the year, Dzingel and Fry. I mean, without Fry, you mentioned they started 0-3 this year. I mean, I know there's against Miami and Bowling Green, some decent teams, but to start the way they did, then have all the goaltending turmoil, and then come out of it on the other side like they did, with their reputation is definitely enhanced, and they'll definitely be a team to contend with next year, especially with that junior class getting one more year of experience, only losing 4 seniors. That is, if everyone comes back, which you would think they would. But Matt, I mean, what do you think? Who's the more important player to you over the season, Dzingel or Fry?
I think it's really interesting with Fry, the fact that he came in midway through the season, and not only did he come in midway through Ohio State season, but he left the USHL. He was playing for the Dubuque Fighting Saints there. Had already played 14 games, and then all of a sudden it's the holiday season, and the Buckeyes need a goalie, and well, they got a gift in Fry. He steps in. He really played well. Really played well for him, and played in big games too, which I think was interesting because they had Matt Tompkins on their roster, and Matt Tompkins is a guy that proved himself earlier in the season too. So when you have 2 good goalies, that's a great problem. But as far as who was more influential for this team, not to discount Dzingel at all. Obviously, he's a Hobey Baker finalist, and when you finish the season with 46 points and you're a plus 17, you're doing some things right. But Ohio State had a lot of depth offensively, and they had a lot of help on those forward lines. So really, goaltending can be a thankless job, but I think Christian Fry was definitely an MVP.
I'm going to say Dzingel because looking at the stat lines, he's getting 46 points for the team that led the team. Second place was McCormick with 35 points, so there's a big gap there. Plus or minus, I don't know how much stock you guys take in this, but Dzingel plus 17 on that line. But also, look, he's 22 goals on 24 assists. That's big there because no one else broke more than 15 goals. He has the 24 assists. The 24 assists ties Max McCormick, but still, wherever there was offense, Ryan Dzingel was more than likely there to help either A, assist the goal, or B, actually score the goal. So I think in the end, he was the bigger player for the team, especially looking at the Big Ten tournament run. They beat Michigan, then they go beat the Minnesota win against the number 1 team there, 3-1, and then they were really 2-goal lead in the third period against Wisconsin. They were very close to taking the Big Ten championship home this season.
Yeah, and I actually got a 10 more to agree with Matt. Actually, it's got to be Christian Fry. Like I said, you mentioned the offense on Ohio State. Sorry about that, Geoff, but you see there's 4 different players with 30 points, excuse me. A lot of different players can chip in. You talk about Fritz with 8 goals, Oda with 9, Angeli with 9, Schilke with 13. McCormick 11. There's a lot of guys who contributed for the team, maybe not to the level that Ryan Dzingel did, but they were all guys that were very instrumental with the offense, and something that led Ohio State to have one of the most potent offenses not only in the Big Ten but in the nation. But before Christian Fry came, there was a lot of up and down going on in the non-conference at the start of the Big Ten, and I think when you saw Christian Fry came in, we talked about it a little bit last week, he started to kind of stabilize kind of the back end of the defense, and that really can help you on offense because it allows you to create more chances. So I think Fry's the MVP. And against Wisconsin, like I said, 5 goals, a couple late goals, and then obviously the overtime one. Wisconsin was able to get pucks in front of the net, but you mentioned his performance against Minnesota, only giving up 2 goals. Michigan State overtime, 2-1 victory. Those games were really big for him, and like I said, there's really good things to come for Ohio State.
Yeah, certainly, and I think those good things to come also come from that freshman class. You had 3 of those freshmen, including Fry, making the team. I think Nick Schilke is probably the breakout star this season. I mean, he had a fantastic year. I think other than those 4 juniors who finished top of the scoring, he was right below them. And he came up with some big goals. He scored over the weekend. I remember he scored a great goal in Wisconsin, just taking the puck across the whole of the ice, beating 2 or 3 guys and scoring. So he's going to be a really big breakout player. Drew Brevig, who I mentioned, had that game-winning goal in overtime against Michigan State on the backside. And so, yeah, I think the Buckeyes are definitely set up for success next year, even though all these teams, you would maybe think that Michigan State might be a little bit stronger. But I think they're going to be in a great position. And I guess we can talk about maybe for the future. First of all, Steve Rollick, his first year coaching, his first year as a head coach at all at any program, and he comes in knowing these players, knowing how they play, and doing such a wonderful job, in my opinion. What do you really think about that, Brett?
Well, I know Matt's touched on it. He worked a lot with the Blue Liners in his time at Ohio State, and coming in, that helped, kind of with the familiarity. It wasn't a new coach. They kind of had an idea of what he wanted to accomplish at Ohio State, and, I feel like that definitely helped ease the transition. Looking forward to the coming years, a lot of things that Ohio State's going to have to work on. It's going to be their road record. This year at home, they were 13-6-2. That's a good record. Definitely room for some improvement. But true road games, they were 3-7-3, and that's a number that any team that wants to make the NCAA tournament and have a run in the national championship, that's something they're going to have to improve. And I think as the freshmen get more experience, Fry gets more experience, and obviously, the juniors, they're now seniors. It's time that they step up and win some road games. That's going to be the key. You got to protect your home ice, but you also got to be able to travel on the road and get wins as well.
And Brett, that's an interesting point because I kind of wonder if it takes more than just trying to get this team up for road games. I guess the point I'm making is Ohio State doesn't exactly have a rink, like a hockey-specific rink. They don't. I mean, they play in the Shot. They play in, I think, what is it, an 18,000?
It's the biggest. It's the biggest arena in the Big Ten basketball.
And they black out the upper deck for.
Well, they can't even get people to fill the lower deck.
And I just don't think that the atmosphere is similar in any way at the Shot that it is in, say, the Kohl Center or Mariucci Arena in Minnesota.
Or Yost. That place is electric.
Yeah, I just think it's so much of a difference for these players that might have an impact.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I mean, you saw whenever they went on the road, so you have Mariucci in Minnesota, you have the Kohl Center in Wisconsin, Yost, even Munn Ice Arena up at Michigan State. I mean, they really packed those places in. They're a lot more closer to the ice, You're really kind of not intimidated, but you just know that the crowd is there. Whereas the Shot's a really big place. And I mean, it's built because they know fans will come out, mostly for basketball. It's not built for hockey. And that is really a shame. And I mean, that definitely caused some problems last year when they had to play at the OSU ice rink, which is smaller where the women play. And I think that is a really good point to talk about how they're not used to that. But I think that if you're going to be a good team, you at least have to have a really good record at home, and that's what they really did. I mean, you thought about Minnesota. I think they lost twice at home all year, and then they lose, and actually, obviously, to Ohio State in the semi of the tournament. So as long as they keep that home record going well, I think that'll be good for them. But, yeah, it's going to be a big transition to try and get those away performances up a little bit. I guess closing out our little talk about hockey, I mean, what are you just thinking for the future of this Ohio State team after this year?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Grant. I'm all ready. I'm all prepped and ready here for that question because it is a big one. Buckeyes are lucky in that they don't really turn over a huge senior class. Curtis Gettig, Alex Lippincott, Travis Statchuk, and Alex Shahura are all going to leave the team. You don't want to point out the guy that had the biggest impact to devalue the others, but Curtis Gettig, a pretty big name and big body leaving the blue line. But the good thing for Ohio State is that they also brought in a pretty good freshman class this season with Josh Healy, who's another big body and can kind of fill that Gettig void. He plays a similar game. Also, Drew Brevig, great puck-moving defenseman, really quick on his feet, great skater. So the Buckeyes can kind of make up for that with these guys having 1 year under their belt. They can step up into a bigger role. But yeah, I just think Ohio State's in a good situation goaltending-wise with Matt Tompkins and Christian Fry, something I've thought about, haven't really said. I wonder if Matt Tompkins is going to be happy with his situation next year or if Christian Fry will be. That's going to be a great goaltending battle, but these are both guys that want to play at the next level, so maybe one doesn't stick around, but obviously just all speculation for that point, but I think the biggest and most interesting thing for Ohio State is that they played that final game against Wisconsin, a Big Ten championship game, and they took them to overtime. They played that game without Justin DeSilva, who's a huge member of that back end. He's a leader in block shots. They played it without Craig Dalrymple, who's a mainstay on the blue line. They played it without Travis Statchuk, all right, and he's a senior. He won't be there next year. And same with Alex Shahura. So a lot of big names, and Ohio State's still able to do it. It's depth, and it's something they'll have next year.
Yeah, I like the point that you brought up with Brevig. Young freshman defender. What I liked about him is, as the season went on, he started, he started to be a more offensive-minded defenseman a little bit. He wasn't just staying at the blue line. If he saw a moment or an opportunity, he chipped down a little bit and got a good shot on goal. You saw that none was more big than against Michigan State. He chipped down. He was able to get the, puck in the back of the net that got him a big win. You see it right there, +6, 1 goal, 2 assists. Definitely big right there. I was wondering the same thing with Tompkins and Fry. Both have aspirations. Both played well this year. I'm sure if one of them, decided to transfer, they could find another team. Or, if one of them, or maybe Fry goes back to the USHL, whatever he wants to do. But, that's definitely an interesting point. Rollick, though, is proven in this year that he can coach. And I definitely think that's, it's definitely big.
Yeah, it is. Jeff, you have anything to say about it?
I just want to add on to what, actually I agree with what you said, Matt. The turnover ratio, there's only a couple guys leaving, and this team went 18, 14, 5. The record, it can only go up at this point. You bring back the same guys for the most part. Saying that they got to the Big Ten championship game, I expect maybe next year, maybe even a win, maybe a 2 or 3 seed entering this thing, so they're not playing 3 or 4 games leading up to that point.
And with the Big Ten, it's always going to be difficult. I mean, Wisconsin and Minnesota are always going to be up there no matter what. And mostly Michigan, even though they trailed off toward the end of the year. But, yeah, certainly very important pieces coming back, and a very great year from Coach Steve Rollick in his first year. A lot of promise for Ohio State hockey. So a little bit more positive note to talk about them, but might have to turn to a little bit more negative tone when we talk about Ohio State men's basketball right after this break. All right, we're back for the second part of this sports podcast. Time to focus on Ohio State men's basketball, which fell in the second round to Dayton on Thursday. We're all pretty disappointed here, but I know we have a lot to say about the players, how they performed, and what's going to happen next. So, Brad, I guess I'll start with you. Your verdict on Ohio State's loss and season.
Well, I just want to say I was right with my prediction. I'm picking Dayton over Ohio State. It's definitely a good call by me.
Yeah, that's what you said, right?
Yeah. May have to check the tape on that. No, yeah, it was an interesting game. Definitely a thrilling game to start the NCAA tournament. And that's what you want in March Madness. Two evenly matched teams that went back and forth the entire game. What I thought was evident in the game was the game meant more to Dayton than it did to Ohio State. You saw that, on the face of Jordan Seibert. Obviously, it's easy to point out him because he's the Ohio State transfer. He wanted the game. But they just played with a lot more fire and intensity towards the end of the game. And I didn't see that from Ohio State. I saw, some lackadaisical efforts on defense. They weren't able to score the ball consistently, which has been a problem all year. But, nothing stood out more than just Dayton went out there and they took it from Ohio State and they deserved the win. And I think it'd be easy to sit here and dwell on the fact that we lost and the season's over. But when you look right down to it, the better team did win.
Jeff, you picked, Jeff, for the record, did pick Dayton.
Yeah, he actually did pick them.
And so I guess, how'd you feel to see everything come to fruition that you predicted?
I mean, I'm not surprised at all. This Ohio State team has been inconsistent. They've been inconsistently shooting the ball from beyond the arc. The team, they're shooting less than 30 or 40% most of their games. I mean, 3-point shots, mostly Iran. I mean, I think I have the numbers right here. But I'm not surprised. The thing is, for Aaron Kraft to end his career like that, getting the ball, last-second shot, going off the rim, it hurts, but still, Ohio State let this game slip away. When you go 3 of 12 from three-point range in that game, 8 of 12 from free throws, I mean, 67% from the free throw line is not good compared to Dayton's 13 of 17, which is about 77%. But still, free throws hurt you in the tournament. Ohio State, they missed 4 free throws. They hit 2 of those. They win the game. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. Is it said that it's an early exit for Buckeye fans? Yes, but for Dayton, they went to the round of 32. They then beat Syracuse. They're now in the Sweet 16. And for them, it's great. But for Ohio State, you learn from this mistake and you move on next year.
I thought what was most interesting about that game is I think it's safe to say I know a lot of people, could point to LaQuinton Ross being one of the best players for Ohio State. But for me, the job that Aaron Kraft has done since he stepped on Ohio State campus has been great. Just defensively, he knows his role on the offensive end, and he did a great job on, against Dayton. A lot of driving layups towards the end. He really took control of Ohio State's offense. He put it on his shoulders, and he said, this is going to be on me. But what I thought was ironic is we all know what a great defensive player Aaron Kraft was. For him to get beat on Dayton's last shot where they got the bucket to put him ahead, I thought that was, a little bit of irony right there. But another question I have is I know Ohio State on that last possession, they went out there with essentially 5 guards. They didn't have any big power forwards or centers in there. Nobody really protect the paint. And that's a question I wish I could have asked Mata, why did he send out the lineup that he did?
That's actually a good question. But also looking, I believe Dayton, they were in the double bonus at that point. So it doesn't matter. If you were going to drive any contact, if you're shooting the ball about anything more than about 5 or 6 seconds, the chances of you getting a foul call is very likely going up there. And I think with Dayton, that was their plan: drive it, see what happens, and they drove it on Kraft. They got the shot to fall, and for Ohio State, they went up the floor, missed their shot at the end. But I think for Dayton, they played a very good game from start to finish. And also, the big thing is looking at it for Jordan Seibert. I mean, 23 minutes he played for that game, 3 of 9 shooting, only got 9 points. But the big thing was the chip on his shoulder to take down Ohio State, a team that he used to play for. I believe he was part of that Final Four run a couple of years ago. I mean, for him, this is almost like his national championship game. Beat Ohio State in the tournament, essentially get some redemption of sorts.
Yeah, as much people are going to criticize Ohio State, and I think they should, they didn't lose to a bad team. I mean, Dayton's really good. Now they're in the Sweet 16. They're probably showing how good they were all season, or they got hot at the right time, and they have a terrific coach. So they're a team that I think there's no shame in losing to, really, even if you're Ohio State and you come in ranked the better seed and you're in the Big Ten. But I think you kind of mentioned it. If anyone had watched Ohio State all season, this was not a surprise. I mean, they can't really shoot the three. But speaking of three, I mean, 2 of the 3 ones they did make were from Sam Thompson, who had probably one of his best games as a Buckeye. He had 18 points, so that's kind of a lone bright spot. But now you have a little bit of change coming through. I mean, not only the seniors leaving like Kraft, but now Amadeo Della Valle going to Europe. I know I said that if he had a big game against Dayton, they might win, and then he didn't, obviously. But, I mean, what do you see as a future for this team, Brett, going into next year? I mean, there was high hopes this year. Maybe some of those younger guys didn't really pan out. I mean, Ross probably didn't become quite the player that everyone expected, and some of the seniors had, an off kind of year. So what do you think they're going to look to next year?
They're going to look to a lot of turnover next year. If you just look at the team, you mentioned Amadeo's leaving, Smith, Kraft, LaQuentin Ross is going to be gone as well. So there's going to be a lot of new faces on the team. But I don't think that's a problem for Ohio State. They always bring in, Coach Mata does a good job of getting in new recruits. It's just a matter of getting them into his system and understanding, what the Ohio State way, kind of, how they want to play basketball, how they want to play, against other teams. But I think the biggest thing that Ohio State needs, they need a little bit of a culture change, in my opinion. Like, Amir Williams, he needs to start showing up in big-time games. You mentioned Sam Thompson had a good game, but I didn't really feel like he was there towards the end of it, but he can definitely be a good player. I just think for Ohio State to bring these players in, just get them to play with that fire and intensity for a full 40 minutes, and I think they're going to be okay. Like I said, Mata's a great coach. He's proven that every stop along the way. And this team, if it is going to be a rebuilding project, it's not going to be one for long.
Yeah, I agree. I think for Ohio State, you're going to lose Smith, you're going to lose Kraft. So Kraft's one of probably your best defenders. Smith at times has been a decent shooter, but you keep Sam Thompson. That's the big thing. Thompson could dunk, the momentum with the alley-oops. That's the big thing for a lot of the home games. The Buckeyes are down 5 or 6 points. Throw up an alley-oop to Sam Thompson, momentum. Other team takes a timeout. You start a run going. But I think for Ohio State, the first part of the year is going to be a work in progress. And so they're going to try to go through the motions, trying to build the team up. But I think they can still make the tournament next year, but I wouldn't expect them to maybe pull down a 1 or 2 seed, but I do expect them to at least make a legitimate run the Big Ten against the Michigan and the Michigan States of the world.
Yeah, we talked about kind of last week about Mata's teams. Usually he had gotten better throughout the season, but this one didn't really go to type. I mean, they start 15-0, and then they're kind of misjumbled or whatever you want to call it for the second half of the season. So, yeah, I think it'll maybe be switched. Maybe that first part.
You kind of saw what happened in the second half of the season. They ran into the Big Ten part of their schedule.
Yeah. Whereas we were talking about hockey earlier, they almost seem to thrive on playing in the conference play, but not really the Buckeye men's basketball team. So Aaron Kraft, I guess, one of the biggest talking points, his last game. What do you think of that last possession? He only had a few seconds, but he just kind of decided to keep it right down the court. Really out of control. Some people calling for a foul there, but I mean, he's not even under control of some bias. There's no way that could be called. Did you like what he did, or would you rather maybe seen him trying to look around?
I think that's a great point right there. That call, if you want to foul, if you're an Ohio State fan, that may have been called in the first half with about 15 minutes left to go, but not with the final play of the game. You mentioned Aaron Kraft's out of control. Dayton's running back on defense. He more or less just essentially created the contact for himself. But Aaron Kraft was the best player in the game, in my opinion, for Ohio State. He got a couple of the late buckets for Ohio State. Let's not forget, he had that great drive to the hoop, kind of reverse layup with about 11 seconds to go to put him up by 1. And I think, at that time you have to give the ball to your hot hand. That's exactly what he did. And, maybe a couple, more bounces here on the rim that goes in. So I like what he did. He took matters into his own hands. He's a senior. That's what you need. The last thing you want on the last possession of the game is somebody who's indecisive. And Kraft knew what he was going to do. He was going to try to get as far as he can and then try to get off a reasonable shot. And I felt like he did that. It's unfortunate that it rimmed out. You never want to see seniors lose in the NCAA tournament. Now, it happens to every team except one. But, under the circumstances, it's always tough. But I feel like he made the right decision.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andy. It's with the final play like that, they will never call a foul, especially if you're going in just loose can't trying to throw the shot up. They will never call that. But I think for Aaron Kraft, he scored 16 points in that game. 18 points was the leading scorer. That was Sam Thompson. So either Thompson or Kraft was going to take that last second shot. And it seemed only fitting that Aaron Kraft would get that opportunity. We know last year against Iowa State hit the game winner, so why not repeat it? But I think this one, he went in, missed the shot. The way he lands, just laying down on the floor and all that fun stuff. But still, I think, is it sad that Aaron Kraft, that's just how his career ended? Yes. But it's been a great career that he's had at Ohio State. He's one of the all-time steals guy at Ohio State. I mean, he's done a great job, but it's unfortunate he can only play 4 years.
Yeah, well, I think the rest of the country would disagree with you there. A lot of people
I
are
know
tired.
they would.
But at the same time, it's nothing that Kraft does. I mean, it's just the media portrayal that people really get mad at.
Nobody's more disappointed than Dan Dockich.
And Kraft's one of those classic players where you hate to play against him. You hate him when he's on the other team, but damn would you love to have him on your team. And I think, if you go to some of those games, you talked about the Sam Thompson dunk effect, which I think has something to say about the student section, but we don't want to get into that now. But really, when a lot of people would get into games, like big momentum shifts, or Kraft steals. Like, the atmosphere at the shot, usually kind of so-so. But if he got like a steal or two, maybe, especially when like a player wasn't looking, one of those classic, he comes from behind, he gets the ball out of the guy's hand. I mean, he did a lot of things that really engaged fans. Obviously, it really got the arena louder, and obviously got his teammates amped up too as well.
Yeah. I know growing up playing basketball, I wasn't much of a player myself, but the one thing my dad always told me, nobody, I don't care who you are, no shooter likes a hand in his face. And that's exactly what Aaron Kraft provided. He can throw off your game at any point in time. And, you don't see too many of those players anymore. A lot of players are more focused on the offensive stats, and they're kind of lackadaisical on defense. But, now with Kraft, he was a defensive-first guy who knew how to drive to the bucket. He knew his role on offense. Definitely a big player for the team. And, just looking at the stats, it doesn't look like he was, much of, a key part to Ohio State's team. But if you watched any part of Ohio State basketball over the last 4 years, you know just how important he was.
He's very important, but I think for Ohio State, especially this season, this team has lived by Aaron Kraft. They've also died by Aaron Kraft. 5 turnovers in that game. And LaQuinn Ross also had 5 turnovers, but that's been the constant thing with Kraft. He gets to a lot of steals, but he turns the ball over a lot, trying to drive, a lot of missed passes, a lot of missed shots going uncontrolled. But still, he's a Final Four run, 3 Sweet 16 runs. The 4 tournament losses he's had, it's been one-possession games. They've not been blown out in March with Aaron Kraft. So either way, it's a sort of a sad ending for the career of Aaron Kraft here in Columbus.
Yeah, you mentioned those games haven't been blown out. So they lost to Kentucky in 2011 by 2. They lost in the Final Four to Kansas by 2. Lose to Wichita State by 4 last year, and now they're Dayton by 1. So it's when they do lose it, it's never been.
Well, the thing is, Kentucky, Brandon Knight hits the game-winning shot over Aaron Kraft. And then in the Kansas first half, a misplay by Aaron Kraft, Kansas gets a layup before break. They go on a run to begin the second half. Wichita State, Kraft goes cold. That's been the thing there. They live and die by him.
Brett, anything to say about that?
I'd completely forgotten about Brandon Knight, to be honest with you, on that Kentucky. That was a great game. The Kansas game, that was one that Ohio State let slip away.
I don't like to think about that one. If any loss over the past 4 years bugs me, it's that one. Not saying we would have beaten Kentucky in that final game. We probably wouldn't have, but at least just to say
it was a very winnable game against Kansas.
Oh, yeah, and
the one that bugs me the most, though, was the Wichita State game, because, in my opinion, Wichita State that's basically the same game as Dayton. It was a team that, going into the tournament, it was a team that, people thought, okay, they got in because they were able to win in a soft conference and they were able to build the wins up. But, at the end of the day, they were more gritty, they were a more determined team. And, that's what wins out in March. It's not just talent. It's about, who wants it more. And unfortunately, the last 2 years, Ohio State just hasn't been able to match that, in my opinion.
Yeah, they haven't. Jeff, you have something else you're looking up here?
Yeah, I think for that Wichita State game, it was a 4-point Wichita State win, and looking at Aaron Kraft, Kraft had 9 points, 2 of 12 shooting. What happened in that game basically was Wichita State doubled up Deshaun Thomas. They essentially dared Aaron Kraft to shoot the ball, and when he shot, Kraft 2 of 12 hit 2 threes because he hit the one against Iowa State, kept the 3-point game going, but still he went very cold in that game. If he shoots 4 of 12 or even 3 of 12, that's enough probably to beat Wichita State and take Ohio State back to another Final Four.
Yeah, it's just fine margins, especially in March. You saw them over the past couple games, and you got to say we are having a great NCAA tournament. I saw Mark Titus say he almost has been enjoying it more now that Ohio State's not in it because he doesn't have to worry about his team, winning or losing. But these games have been really enjoyable, but of course, that's then the road for Ohio State this year. So that's our wrap-up for this week. Still a lot of stuff going on here at Ohio State this next week. I mean, you got baseball, which is really in full swing now, softball, tennis, all that good stuff.
Men's lacrosse.
Men's lacrosse, that's right. Maybe we'll talk about some of that next week. But as always, thanks for listening. For Geoff Hammersley, Matt McGreevy, Brett Amadon, this is Grant Miller signing off. We'll talk to you next week.